Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Shabbat. We are up to Perek Gimel, Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnah should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Tzvedlana, Aranbai, ben Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen. Having dealt with a kira, the Mishnah now will discuss a tanur, which is an oven narrower at its top than at its bottom. So because of its shape, a tanur does not lose its heat easily and therefore is treated more stringently than a kira. I recommend, Rabotai, if you could find an illustrated version of the Mishnayot, to look at the differences between the tanur, the kira. We're going to speak about a kupach soon, but let us begin the Mishnah. Tanur shesikua bekash uvigvava. If a tanur was heated even with straw or chips of wood, lo iten ben mitocho ben me'al gabav. One may not place food either inside of it or on top of it. Now, although these types of fuel do not turn into coals, they create some small embers, and we are concerned that a person might stir these embers. Now, a tanur, the Rav explains, retains enough heat that it can cook food even after the fuel is used up and only embers remain. So one might therefore stir the embers to make the food cook faster. Now, since the prohibition applies even to a tanur that was heated with straw or chips of wood, it certainly applies to one heated with pulp or large pieces of wood. And even if the coals were formed by the pulp and wood were removed or covered with ash, the prohibition still applies because a tanur remains so hot that there is a concern that one might nevertheless stir the remaining embers. Now, the Mishnah will speak of another type of stove called the kupach. A kupach is similar to the kira of the previous Mishnah, except that a kira is rectangular and has room for two pots, while a kupach is square and has place for only one pot. Since a kupach is smaller than a kira, it becomes hotter and stays hot longer. Even so, it's not as hot as a tanur. Therefore, in some ways, it's treated like a kira, and in other ways, like a tanur. Kupach shesikua bikash uvigvava hareze kechiraim. A kupach that was heated with straw or chips of wood is treated like a kira. Just as one may leave hot food on a kira that was heated with straw or wood chips, like we taught in the previous Mishnah, so too one may leave hot food on a kupach that was heated with these substances. Now, like we mentioned, a kupach is hotter than a kira. Nevertheless, when a kupach is heated with straw or chips of wood, it will not be hot enough to cook food once the fuel is used up and only embers remain. Therefore, there's no concern that one will stir the embers. One is permitted, therefore, to leave food on a kupach heated with these substances, as the previous Mishnah taught with regards to a kira, as the Rab explains. Begefet uvetzim hareu chitanur. However, if it was heated with pulp or large pieces of wood, it is treated like a tanur, like we taught with respect to a tanur. One may not leave food on a kupach that was heated with these substances, even if the coals were removed or covered. And the Mefarshim explain, a kupach that was heated with pulp or large pieces of wood is considerably hotter than a kira, and in fact, its heat is comparable to that of a tanur. So being so hot, the kupach can cook food even after the coals have been removed or covered, with only embers left behind. Therefore, one may not leave food on a kupach even after the coals have been removed or covered, because of the concern that he will stir the embers. And in this respect, a kupach is treated as stringently as a tanur, unlike a kira, on which food may be left when its coals have been removed or covered. So we had kira, which was the, so to speak, lightest level. We had tanur, and then we had kupach, right? The kira was the lightest level, the tanur was the strictest level, and the kupach was the in-between level. That is the end of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel now discusses, we know, the Isur D'Oraita, the biblical prohibition against cooking on Shabbat, applies only when using heat that has fire as its source. Cooking with heat from the sun is not biblically considered cooking, since this is not how cooking is normally done. So the Mishnah discusses cooking not directly over a fire or under the sun, but by the heat of an object or substance that itself has been heated by fire or by the sun. So the Mishnah says, "En notnin bitza demecham b'shvil shetitgalgel." We may not place an egg next to a hot kettle on Shabbat in order that it should roll, which means become slightly cooked, even though the kettle is not on the fire. Now the Mefarshim explain this language of shetitgalgel. A raw egg does not roll easily. So as the egg begins to cook or roast, it hardens and rolls more easily. So the Mishnah refers to the slight degree of roasting that is enough to make the egg roll. Even that slight degree you cannot achieve by putting it next to a hot kettle on Shabbat. Now, the reason being, even if the kettle is not on the fire, the reason is because it's biblically forbidden not only to cook directly over a fire, but even by the heat of something that itself has been heated by fire. Now, the kettle of which the Mishnah is speaking about, which was originally heated by fire, but is no longer on the fire, is known as toldat ta'ol, something heated by fire, but literally means a derivative of the fire. The Mishnah teaches that even cooking with such an object is biblically forbidden under the melacha of cooking. Velo yafki'ena bisudarin. And we may not break an egg open and fry it upon scarves that had been heated by the sun. Now, although cooking with heat whose source is the sun, whether under the sun itself or with something heated by the sun, is biblically permitted, it's mutar midoraita, the rabbis prohibited cooking with something that had been heated by the sun because they were concerned that it might lead to cooking with something that had been heated by fire, which we said is included in the biblical melacha of cooking. Now, although it's permissible to cook on Shabbat by the direct heat of the sun, by setting an egg or a glass of water in a place where it will receive the full heat of the sun's ray on Shabbat, cooking by the heat of toldat chama, something heated by the sun, is forbidden midrabanan, by rabbinic decree. Because the rabbis were concerned that if it were permissible to cook by the heat of something heated by the sun, like the scarves, that might lead to cooking by the heat of something heated by fire, which violates the isur d'oraita mivashed, the biblical prohibition of cooking. They did not forbid cooking by the heat of the sun itself, because people will not confuse cooking in the sun with cooking over a fire. But they did prohibit toldat chama, so that you won't violate toldat ta'ol, right? A derivative of the sun, so that you won't violate a derivative of heat. Now, Rabbi Yossi matir, but the Mishnah says Rabbi Yossi permits cooking an egg on sun-heated scarves, because in his opinion, the rabbis did not prohibit cooking with something that had been heated by the sun. Rabbi Yossi, the Mefarshim explain, is not concerned that people will confuse a sun-heated scarf with a pot heated by fire. He agrees, however, that toldat ha'ol, cooking by the heat of a kettle, is forbidden, even after it has been removed from the fire, since the kettle is something heated by fire, right? Toldat ha'ol. He disagrees with the sages. He permits toldat chama, but even he agrees toldat ta'or is asur. And the Rav tells us, ve'en halakha Rabbi Yossi, the halakha does not follow Rabbi Yossi, the halakha follows the Tanakama, that even toldat chama, something heated up by the sun, that is prohibited on Shabbat as well. Now, there are some cases in which even Rabbi Yossi agrees that one may not use something heated by the sun to heat food. Ve'lo yatminena bechol uva'avak derachim. But we may not bury an egg in sand or in the dust of roads that have become hot in the sun, bishvil shetitzaleh, in order to roast it. Rabbi Yossi agrees that this is forbidden because Mefarshim explain, according to Rabbi Yossi, if one is allowed to cover an egg in hot sand or dust on Shabbat, he might come to cover it in hot ash, which is biblically prohibited. The Mefarshim explain, if one were allowed to bury an egg in sun-heated sand, people might not realize that this is permitted because the sand was not heated by fire. So instead, they might think that burying food in any hot substance is not regarded as cooking. This could lead them to believe that one may bury food even in the ash of coals heated by fire, which is an isur d'oraita, biblical transgression of the melacha of cooking, mivashel. Therefore, even Rabbi Yossi agrees in this situation that it would be prohibited. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.